I'm Jenni Carlson.
I'm Barry Trammell. Welcome to the Jenni and Berry Show.
The final week of the NBA regular season arrives, and the Thunder, they've struggled as stars Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Jalen Williams have sat out with injuries.
Yeah, OKC has lost 3 straight before edging hapless Charlotte on Sunday night. And now the Thunder could be staring at the number 3 seed. But is that a bad thing? We'll talk about that and much more.
But first, we want to tell you to subscribe to our show. Just hit that subscribe button. Might not seem like a big deal, but it will help us, and that helps you. So subscribe today. We also want to say thanks to these sponsors for supporting the Jenni and Berry Show. MidFirst Bank, Next Gen Roofing, the Oklahoma Ford Dealers Association. Drive into your best in Oklahoma Ford dealers today for the best deals on Ford's full lineup of trucks and SUVs. Ford is the best in Oklahoma. All right, Barry, like you say, that 5-game road swing the Thunder had, not exactly a good feeling coming out of that. The Thunder winning in New York, then losing 3 in a row, then finally beating Charlotte, but having injuries to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Jalen Williams. Is it time to, is there worry about the Thunder? Is there reason for concern right now about this team?
I think yes, for this reason. Even before the injuries, before the Thunder played without SGA and Santa Clara Williams, they weren't playing that great since about the start of February, somewhere along the All-Star break, whenever you want to make the line. But Thunder just hasn't been playing as well as it did earlier in the season. And I was a little bit concerned even before the injuries. And now, the Thunder really struggled without those two, as most teams would without their best 2 players. But yeah, I think I'm not the basketball doctor. I can't diagnose the problem, but the Thunder is not playing as well as it did. And those injuries certainly didn't help.
Yeah. And I think there's probably, obviously you can't know for sure. And if you ask, I don't know if you get the real truth, but this team played at a super high level for a long time, set itself up fantastically in the Western Conference at the top of the standings on numerous occasions. And I think, you hate to think that they could get complacent. They're still such a young team, but you see where you are in the standings. You see where everybody else is in the standings. I think it's human nature to let off the gas a little bit. Mark Daigneault always talks about, stacking days and stacking experiences and all that. And it's great to talk about that. But the players still have to make the decision to go out there full blast every night. And, if you've got home court advantage pretty much sewed up, it's easy to see how they might not be at their best. So is that worrisome? Maybe a little bit. You don't know how a young team, are they just going to be able to regenerate and start playing great again in the playoffs? But I could see where you start looking at the standings, you realize that, if you finish first or you finish second or you finish third or fourth in the West, there's a good chance you're going to have a matchup that is going to be tough because the West is tough. So it may just be a little bit of, sort of mental easing off for the Thunder. Now, the injuries are a whole other thing. I frankly was never that worried about SGA, Barry, because he missed 2 games, then miraculously was good enough to play in Madison Square Garden, hits the game winner, and then he's out again. I think as much as anything, this is just about giving him a long runway to make sure his body is as healthy as possible heading into the playoffs. I was never worried about him. Now, Jalen Williams, ankle, that's a little more concerning because, you want him to be as healthy as possible. But I was never that worried about the injuries. Maybe other people were, but to me, there wasn't a big worry from me on those 2 guys.
Yeah, I'm not really worried about the injuries, particularly Santa Clara, as you mentioned. If there was really something, troublesome there, he wouldn't have been on the bench in Philly and Boston and Charlotte and Indianapolis. He'd have been on a plane back to Oklahoma City for treatment and all kinds of stuff. So I think that's fine. I am worried about the way they have played, though. I don't think it's just hitting the wall late in the season. It's a bunch of 23-year-olds, a bunch of 20-year-olds. Youngest team in the league, second youngest team in the league. I don't think the wall is problem for them. I don't think the dog days. Give them 3 or 4 years, yeah, they're not gonna like the dog days. But I don't know if teams are scouting them better. I don't know what the problem is. I do think they can snap out of it. It's a long season. Nobody plays this year except the Celtics. Nobody is up or down. Everybody's up, down, up, down. We've seen that with Dallas, with Phoenix, with the Clippers, with Minnesota. We've seen it with virtually everybody. So there's no reason why it shouldn't happen to the Thunder as well. But it is something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And it's one of those things that, for as young as this team is, they had so few games when they had their full roster. These last few games with, missing your best 2 players, that's a whole other thing. When they've had their full measure of players, they have rarely been in situations where you thought, man, they're not playing hard. They're not playing well. They really have played at a high level for so much of this season. It's a reminder that they do have to play with exceptional effort. Yes, they've got talent, but because they're as young as they are, and they're still evolving, they really do have to play with a high level of physical and mental acuity in games. They just have to really max out to be at the level that they were there for a while. So I agree. I think they can get back to it, but it's interesting because you really start to appreciate that they did play at such a high level, and that and if they're sliding, you can see, oh, okay, this is maybe what youth or, not having a roster that's as jam-packed with talent as some of these other teams. But still, that win at New York, to me, that said this team is still very capable because New York has a fantastic team. So for them to go into Madison Square Garden, win that game, really trade punches with them, I thought that was a heck of a win, and sort of reminded me, oh yeah, these guys know what it takes. Because I think, Barry, they're gonna have a heck of a matchup no matter where they finish. But does the seeding matter in your mind? If the Thunder's 1, 3, wherever, does that matter for this team?
No, because I think what matters most is who you're seeded against, and we don't know. We don't know, who's going to finish 6th. Is it going to be the Pelicans? Is it going to be the Suns? Can the Kings get up there? Would it be nice to be 2 and avoid the Lakers as a potential 8? Sure, you don't want to play the Lakers. They're playing better. It's Anthony Davis versus Chet Holmgren. Not a good matchup. All those things, but you don't know where anybody's going to land in the West, so you can't worry about it. You just win as much as you can, and because that will guarantee. It won't guarantee you who you'll play, but it will guarantee you home court advantage against certain seeds. So I don't think it matters. Just worry more about how that bracket plays out more than what the number is next to your name.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Although I do think it's interesting if they finish in that 3 spot, they're going to know before the play-in tournament who they're going to match up against. It gives them a few extra days of game planning, of preparation, some of those things that for a young team, could be beneficial. But again, because we don't know what that 6 will look like, and there are definitely some matchups that are better and matchups that are worse for this team, it appears. So I would say, yeah, that could be a slight advantage unless, one of those teams that's a really hard matchup becomes the 6. So I don't really see these top teams. It doesn't feel to me like, the Nuggets or the Wolves or the Thunder, quite honestly, being the top 3 in the West. I don't see any of them sort of, pressing to finish in that top spot. I think they know that there's so much churn at the bottom of the standings. It's really hard to know who's coming out of this to play 1 and 2, and even 3 as we look ahead to the playoffs. So I don't think that where the Thunder lands is going to be. They're not falling out of the top 4. We know that. It's almost mathematically impossible at this point. In fact, it may be mathematically impossible. So they're going to finish top 4, home court for the first round. Then I think everything after that, a little more up in the air. Let's go back to these injuries for just a second, Barry. SGA, Jalen, Santa Clara Williams, sitting the bench. Did you feel like anything good came out of those 2 guys missing extended period for this team. Any positives that came out of their absences?
Absolutely, and that positive was Josh Giddey. Giddy's been playing much better for the last 5 weeks. Since March arrived, his production and his efficiency, all those things, much better. And he's looking like the player that he sort of was progressing towards from year 1 to year 2, and then year 2 to year 3. But this season, he hadn't played that great, but he's played much better in the last 5 weeks. And in the last week, when he's had to run the team, he's looked really good. He's looked like a classic NBA point guard, getting things done, getting to the basket, directing the squad, keeping things in order, really playing well. On that road trip with the 3 straight losses and the near miss against Charlotte, which would have been inexcusable, the rest of the team did not play well. Giddey played well. He sort of kept the ship afloat, and that's very good for a lot of reasons. It's good going forward here down the stretch of this season, the playoffs, all those things. I also think it increases his trade value because,
absolutely,
I don't know if the Thunder wants to trade Giddey, but it certainly would be a possibility because it's pretty clear that his potential, his skills are not being maximized with this roster. SGA and Santa Clara. SGA is a superstar. Santa Clara is a coming star, going to be an all-star soon. Guys that excel with the ball in their hands. And here's Josh Giddey. That's his primary skill. And he doesn't have the ball in his hands that much. So it's a little bit of, bloated skill for the Thunder. They got too much of a good thing, and it chips away at the value of Josh Giddey. I think people could watch those 3-4 games, say, look, that guy can play. I think that increases his trade value. That's something to look out for in the summer leading up to the draft.
Yeah, I think Giddey's definitely the big winner. Although, we saw some extended play out of Aaron Wiggins, who I think, all he does is make good plays when he's on the floor. So he's a guy that, the fact that he was out there getting a chance to, play a little bit more, I thought that was, again, good for the here and now, but potentially good long term, because if you're a potential trade target or team that could be in the trade business, I mean, that's a guy you could look at and say, hey, we can use Aaron Wiggins. Aaron Wiggins can play ball. So I think that's interesting as well. But, the Thunder depth is going to be a really interesting part of how far this team goes in the playoffs, because it does become a grind. You've got to, I think the bench will get shortened some, but I still think we'll see a good amount of these guys come off the bench, whether it's Isaiah Joe, Wiggins. I think they're going to have to, bring some of these, Jalen Williams from Arkansas. They're going to have to play these guys. So they're going to have to be out there in big moments. How do they respond? I think getting them in some games where they were faced with that situation more from the start, I think that was good. But yeah, I think Giddey, to me, Barry, and I may have said it on a show we did before, I can't remember, but I felt like there was a point where Giddey sort of had this realization like, hey, I'm 6'8". I can get inside on some of these guys who are guarding me. I can maybe not bully, but I can get to spots. And I think that was just reinforced. This guy is sort of figuring out where he fits best, what he can do best. And that's great. I mean, I think that's great for him. And like you said, I think it's great for the future. So I think as we head into Tuesday night's game here in Oklahoma City, Sacramento coming to town, SGA no longer on the injury report. We expect him back. Don't know about Jalen Williams at this point. Now the question is, can these guys start to round in? And then how far can they go in the playoffs? Is it reasonable to think a Western Conference Finals, something more? What's your best guess on just what the ceiling is for this team in the playoffs?
Well, I think the Thunder's vulnerable against most teams in the West. I also think they're capable of beating any team in the West except Denver. I don't think they can get past the Nuggets with Jokic. I just think Chet's a little on the inexperienced side, a little on the frail side at this point. He's been great. He's been wonderful as a rookie, but asking him to beat Jokic in a 7-game series, little much. Now, that doesn't mean somebody else couldn't beat Denver. It doesn't mean Jamal Murray's going to be healthy. If Jamal Murray's not playing and he's been hurt down the stretch, that goes out the window. So the NBA Finals are not out of the Thunder's reach, but they might need some help to get past Denver. whether it's somebody else beating the Nuggets or Jamal Murray being gone. Otherwise, I think the Thunder has a fighting chance against Minnesota. I think they would have a fighting chance against the Clippers. I think they'd have a fighting chance against the Mavs. I think they'd have a fighting chance against some of the Suns, the Lakers, all these teams, and some of those teams the Thunder would be a clear favorite against. So I think the Thunder can do some things in this playoff, but it's also a crapshoot, and they also have Jokic there waiting at the gate.
Yeah, I think that's a big hurdle. I think they could make the Western Conference Finals, and not easily, because I don't think anything is easy in the West. I think if you get to the Western Conference Finals, you're going to have earned your way there. Even if there are better and worse matchups, no matter the matchups, whoever the Thunder faces in a 7-game series, if you advance 1 round, 2 rounds, whatever, it's going to have been earned in the West. So I think beating a full-throated Denver feels unlikely, or on the slim chances scale, it's way down there. But anybody else, I think they've got a fighting chance to beat. Obviously they're youthful, but while that means inexperience in the playoffs, it also means they can run and get up and down the floor in a way that teams like the Warriors are not that interested in playing. They don't want to play the speed that the Thunder's going to play. So there's some advantages to that youth as well. So I think that is, I do think there are some great possibilities for this team. Matchups are going to be key. They always are. But I think that's going to really determine whether we're talking about, winning 2 series, getting to the conference finals, maybe going further. I think those matchups it's that way every year, but it's definitely that way for this team. Are there, when you think about concerns, we started out talking about injuries. Is that the biggest concern for the Thunder, or are there other things that, as you think about the next few weeks here for this team, is that the concern, or is it something else, Barry?
No, I think it's something else. I think it's the interior. When we talk about the matchups, the seedings, all those things, first thing we think about is how does the Thunder match up, and we're not talking about Steph Curry and Klay Thompson. We're not talking about Kevin Durant and Devin Booker. We're talking about what do they do with Anthony Davis? What do they do with Jokic in Denver? What do they do against these big guys who push people around and have the bulk and the muscle edge on Chet Holmgren and Arkansas Williams and Kenrich Williams? And the Thunder's just still a small team, and playoffs slow down. It's not as much back and forth. It becomes a little more physical, or a lot more physical. Yeah. So I think that's the biggest concern. Can the Thunder hold up physically? I know they can on the perimeter. I'm not worried about out there, but in the paint, rebounding, interior defense, those kinds of things, can they hold up?
Yeah, and you think about it, it's pretty much every team in the West may not have a Jokic, but they've got a guy that, can really get down there and bang, whether it's, Zion Williamson with the Pelicans. Yep. I mean, there's somebody everywhere that, could have a big night or several big nights against the Thunder. So, we've seen Chet Holmgren, we've seen this team adjust pretty well. How quickly can they adjust in the playoffs? That becomes one of the biggest questions for a team in the playoffs. Those adjustments from game 1 to game 2. What you've seen things in game 1. What do you do in game 2 to counter? Game 3. All of that just becomes a huge question mark, and how a team adjusts. Thunder seems to have done it fantastically this year. We saw how they transitioned from a blowout loss to Denver to then handling Denver. So they obviously made some adjustments and knew how to do that. How do they do that on a shorter time frame where the other team is doing the same? They're adjusting for you. So it's on the players, it's on the coaches. I mean, this will be it's not just the players' first time in the playoffs. It's Mark Dagnall's first time as a head coach in the playoffs. It's his staff as it's currently constructed first time in the playoffs. So how do they adjust? That was one of the things, for all the things that people didn't like about Billy Donovan. He was a heck of an adjuster in the playoffs. They made some killer adjustments during his time with the Thunder. So how does this coaching staff adjust? We don't know. So many unknowns about this team. I think it's going to be really fascinating to see as the Thunder gets ready to go into the playoffs. Well, that's all the time we've got this week. Remember, subscribe to our show. It really does help us. And if you like what you hear, please leave us a review. You can find all of our columns, videos, and podcasts at selloutcrowd.com. And if you want our content sent straight to your inbox, all you have to do is subscribe to our newsletter. It's free and it's easy. Just go to selloutcrowd.com and sign up today. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.